Watts would have been the first serial killer in this country's history ever to be legally released due to several quirks in Texas law.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today is the first of two parts exploring the most infamous serial killer connected to each U.S. state. We'll be looking at those who were either born in or committed their terrible crimes within each state's borders.
Do you remember killing her?
Yeah, possibly. We're not going into details here.
Alabama, Nannie Doss.
From her track record, it looks that anyone who got on her wrong side, they signed their own death warrant.
With the moniker of the Giggling Granny, Doss sounds like she'd be a sweet woman. However, she was anything but. Born and raised in Alabama, a childhood head injury may have led to her descent into darkness. Doss was married 5 times, but only her first husband survived the union. Finding subsequent husbands through Lonely Hearts columns and clubs, she'd take life insurance out on them before poisoning them. Yet it wasn't just the husbands who were Doss's targets, so were other family members, including 2 of her children. When final husband Samuel Doss died in 1954, it was discovered that arsenic was the cause, and this was traced to his wife. After confessing to 11 murders, Doss was sentenced to life in 1955.
To sit back and watch someone who's slowly being eaten away from the inside out is vicious.
Alaska, Robert Hansen.
He crossed the line out of desperation, and any kind of resistance, that just made him want to punish them more.
Born in Iowa, Hansen moved to Alaska to set up a bakery after serving time for arson and being diagnosed with several mental health disorders. He brought his criminal impulses with him, eventually abducting, assaulting, and murdering numerous women starting in 1972. In 1983, Cindy Paulson was abducted but managed to escape, which later led to Hansen's arrest.
So I thought, what the hell is Bob Hansen doing on national news? And I turned it up and it said, this is the greatest mass murder in the history of Alaska. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I had no idea.
During the investigation, it was discovered that he'd been kidnapping women, taking them to a remote cabin, assaulting them, and often releasing them to hunt them in the wilderness. After pleading guilty to 4 murders, Hansen made a deal to lessen his sentence by showing the authorities 17 graves. However, it's expected he might have taken many more lives. Hansen received 461 years in prison before dying in 2014.
He demanded that he be imprisoned outside of Alaska when the trial was over. In exchange for only 4 convictions, he agreed to show the troopers where more bodies were buried.
Arizona, Mark Goudeau.
For 10 months, you acted as a terrorist in our community.
I'm an innocent man. I did not commit these crimes.
In 2006, Phoenix, Arizona was in a state of fear as the Baseline Killer was taking lives. Most of the murder victims were found near Baseline Road, hence the moniker. The killer had taken 9 lives and had committed various assaults and robberies too. DNA evidence taken from the victims matched another case involving Goudeau assaulting 2 sisters in 2005.
The last victim, murdered in June, 37-year-old Carmen Miranda, was abducted from a car wash at 29th Street in Thomas, just blocks from where Goudeau lives.
The construction worker who was born in the city was soon arrested. His wife stated that he was innocent, despite Goudeau's previous conviction for violent assault. In 2011, Goudeau was found guilty of all 9 murders and many other charges, earning him the death penalty 9 times over and 1,762 years in jail.
Keep in mind, police already had Mark Goudeau's DNA in the system from a previous felony conviction. So when the technicians finally did test everything,
bam, match right to Mark Goudeau from that left breast swab.
Arkansas, Freddrick Jackson.
After we review all of the evidence, including the grand jury's deliberations, as well as speaking to those people involved, we'll make a decision as to whether this will be a capital case or not.
Even as a child, Jackson was known to the cops in Little Rock, Arkansas. After all, on top of several violent episodes, theft, and possessing illegal substances that earned him probation, his uncle was fatally shot by police and his pregnant mother was murdered. In 2020, Jackson began his spree. By 2022, he'd taken the lives of 4 people when he was aged 15 to 17 years old. After being arrested, Jackson pleaded guilty to the murders, earning him 50 years in jail. However, due to being a minor when the killings were committed, instead of needing to serve 70% of the sentence before parole, he'll become eligible after 25 years. California. Edmund Kemper.
Leading detectives to the scenes of his crimes, he would explain his murders in chilling detail to anybody who'd listen.
Many serial killers harmed animals as children, and Kemper fits that profile. After a dysfunctional upbringing, in 1963, he went to live with his grandparents in the state of his birth, California. The next year, the 15-year-old took their lives, earning him 5 years in a state hospital for mentally ill criminals. Yet Kemper had a high IQ and an imposing size, which combines to make him a serious threat. In 1972 and 73, he morphed into the co-ed killer, murdering 6 female students who were hitchhiking. Then, after taking the lives of his mother and her friend, Kemper handed himself in to the police. Including his grandparents, he'd taken 10 lives. While he requested execution, Kemper was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences.
I've never been much to look at myself, but I've always gone after the pretty girls. Bet you're the same.
Colorado. Scott Lee Kimball.
He was a bad guy, catching worse guys. But there's a problem. He was on the run.
After a troubled childhood and being the victim of abuse, Kimball began committing fraud and other crimes in his home state of Colorado and other nearby areas. He was sent to jail, and while there, Kimball became an FBI informant, earning a paycheck for telling the authorities about what other inmates may have been up to. Following his release in 2002, Kimball moved on to murder.
It's hard to be involved in a case and not know the whys, why this happened. It's hard to forget these kind of cases. I mean, it's somebody's child, a human being, you know, and so those are questions you really want answered.
Most of which took place as he was operating as an informant. Between 2003 and 2004, on top of allegedly attempting to kill his own son, Kimball took the lives of at least 4 people. In 2006, after he was arrested for fraud, his murders came to light. In 2009, Kimball was sentenced to 70 years in jail.
What we wanted him marked for, of course, is the violent, murderer that he is.
Connecticut. Michael Bruce Ross.
His 2-year Connecticut rampage started in January of 1982, driving along busy Route 6 in Danielson, Connecticut.
In 2005, Ross became the first person since Joseph Taborski in 1960 to be executed in Connecticut. After graduating from college and working in insurance, Ross began his killing spree in New York and his home state of Connecticut. Between 1980 and 1984, he took the lives of at least 8 women and girls, most of whom he assaulted too.
Serial killers like to strangle their victims, and that is, I guess, the most common form of killing, because there's more of a connection there, it's more real, and it's not as quick.
While awaiting his sentence, the killer nicknamed the roadside strangler found religion inside. He spent years fighting his fatal punishment, but in his final months welcomed it. After the execution, a psychiatrist who fought for Ross not being competent enough to waive his appeals received a posthumous letter from the killer stating, quote, "Check and mate, you never had a chance," end quote.
For some of us, death is not a punishment. Living is what the punishment is.
Delaware. Stephen Brian Pennell.
These eyes, they were almost like a shark's eyes, I mean, they were almost emotionless. He testified as if he was like an automaton. I mean, we spent hours preparing for cross-examination.
At the current time, Pennell has the distinct honor of being Delaware's only recognized modern serial killer. Known as the Route 40 killer due to most of his victims being taken from that highway, Pennell targeted women between 1987 and 1988 within his home state. The police sent an officer undercover on his hunting grounds, eventually coming into contact with Pennell when he tried to pick her up in his car.
We have the individual has killed two people in very similar manner. Tabarro had more torture, so right away you realize that the level of violence taken on these victims was increasing.
Following the jury's verdict, the Delaware native fired his lawyer and represented himself. Instead of fighting the prosecution, Pennell requested capital punishment, which was granted. He was convicted by jury of 2 murders and pleaded no contest to 2 more. In 1992, Pennell's execution was carried out.
If this ordinary-looking electrician is secretly a serial killer stalking local prostitutes, he has done nothing to give himself away.
Bonus, District of Columbia, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo.
Losing custody of his children completely devastated John. It made him angry and depressed. In Lee Malvo, John saw someone that lacked a father figure, someone he could teach and mold, someone he could ultimately turn into a killing machine.
While not technically a state, instead being a federal district, we couldn't ignore the nation's capital. In 2002, U.S. Army veteran Muhammad and his teenage accomplice Malvo began their killing spree. Over the space of several months, the duo, usually with a sniper rifle, fatally shot people in D.C. and many other states, including Virginia, Washington, and Maryland.
Called him that. And once he earned my trust, it was pretty much complete. Imagine it being a cult of 2.
During their rampage, 17 people were murdered and 10 were injured. Following several trials across various states, Muhammad was sentenced to death, which was enacted in 2009. Malvo received 10 consecutive life sentences without parole. However, due to being a minor at the time of the killings, his convictions have been reduced in recent years.
Since his arrest, Lee Malvo has told police that all the shootings were carried out jointly, and he pulled the trigger on the boy. Allegedly, it is Malvo's writing in the letters, voice on the police tapes, and print found on the murder weapon.
Florida, Aileen Wuornos.
I intend to expose the crooked cops to the people all over the world. Not just America, not just Florida, all over the world before I die.
After an abusive upbringing in Michigan, Wuornos became a sex worker, eventually moving to Florida. After committing several crimes, she moved on to killing in 1989. Wuornos would execute her male clients and then rob them. Nearly exactly a year after her spree began, she'd taken the lives of 7 men.
She's been called the Damsel of Death and the Hooker from Hell. But embellishment aside, the story of history's first female serial killer is macabre enough, even without its supporting cast of characters.
Originally, Wuornos claimed it was self-defense after being assaulted by the victims. However, she later changed her motives to desiring to steal from them and leave no witnesses. Yet, when speaking to documentarian Nick Broomfield later, Wuornos changed to self-defense again. She was sentenced to death for her crimes. In prison, Wuornos found religion and stated she deserved capital punishment as she rejected appeals. The sentence was carried out in 2002.
Thank you, Judge. And may you rot in hell.
Georgia, Paul John Knowles.
The Anderson sisters are on the list of at least 18 victims murdered by Paul John Knowles. But it's clear that list is probably incomplete.
In 1974, Knowles escaped from jail after being arrested for attacking someone in his home state of Florida. That night, he began his spree that led him to be labeled as the Casanova Killer. From July to November, Knowles robbed and took 18 lives in several states, including Nevada, Florida, and Georgia. In the latter, after committing 2 more murders, he got into a car chase with the police, but was eventually arrested with help from an armed citizen. Some weeks later, while in a car with 2 officers, Knowles attempted to grab one of the cops' weapons, leading to the other officer fatally shooting the killer. Knowles is known to have admitted to murdering up to 35 people, although many believe this is an exaggeration.
The 2 murders seemed to be a finale to Paul John Knowles' murderous spree. But no one could imagine he wasn't finished.
Hawaii, Eugene Barrett. Born in California and then relocated to Hawaii during childhood, Barrett would become the first identified serial killer in Hawaii. In 1959, the Army veteran was angry that his girlfriend had dumped him. So Barrett, who had an alcohol use disorder, took her life. While he was sentenced to life, he was mysteriously paroled by Hawaii Governor John A. Burns in 1967. He married, but in 1972, after his wife left him, Barrett killed her too. He pled guilty and was handed a 10-year sentence, getting out by 1976. Some years later, Barrett became obsessed with his neighbor, leading him to admit himself into a psychiatric hospital. In 1995, shortly after his release, Barrett killed her, earning him life imprisonment before dying in 2003. Idaho, Thomas Eugene Creech.
I saw my wife sitting there. She had the most devastating, horrible, terrorized look on her face that I have ever seen in my life.
After a life of crime, in 1974, Creech and his girlfriend Carol Spaulding were hitchhiking in Idaho when a car offered a ride. During the trip, he killed the 2 people who pulled over. After being accused of further murders, the Ohio native was arrested. During the trial, Creech claimed to have killed 42 people in various states as far back as 1966. However, many details didn't always match up. Regardless, Creech was found guilty of 4 murders and received multiple life sentences. However, in 1981, he killed an inmate, earning him the death penalty.
Creech was serving time for 2 murder convictions in Idaho.
He was convinced to attack and did, in fact, murder David Jensen, a 22 or 23-year-old young man who was in prison as a car thief.
In 2024, Creech's execution was halted due to issues with an intravenous line. While another date was set, a judge postponed it to allow Creech to legally challenge it.
In our opinion, Creech was a psychotic, and he didn't like inmates, and he would probably kill someone if they didn't supervise him very closely around other inmates.
Illinois, John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, I heard a weird sound.
Well, just the sump pump pumping out the gun.
No, not that. It's a strange whining noise.
Maggots.
A pillar of his Illinois community, Gacy seemed on the surface to be a good person. After all, he owned his own business, participated in politics, and entertained children as a clown. Yet in reality, he was a monster. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured boys and young men to his home, typically with the promise of work, only to assault and take their lives.
Gacy continues to accumulate bodies, and claiming they are drainage ditches, he even has his employees dig trenches in his crawl space, trenches he will use as graves.
However, after being seen with his last victim, the police eventually searched Gacy's property to find human remains in the crawl space. In 1980, the Illinois native nicknamed the Killer Clown was found guilty of 33 counts of murder, earning him the death penalty. The sentence was carried out in 1994.
What happened to the body afterwards? Was one that was that body was put into the river?
It was taken to the river and dumped in the river.
Did you help do that?
Yes, I'm in complicity with that. I've always contended. Don't look at me as an innocent babe of the wood.
Indiana, Belle Gunness. Born in Norway, Gunness relocated to Illinois where she got married. However, she seemed to have horrible luck. As well as her home and candy store burning down, Gunness's husband perished. With the insurance money, she purchased a pig farm in Indiana. Yet still her string of bad luck continued as her next husband died mysteriously, earning her more cash. Strangely, several men who responded to Gunness's marriage advertisements vanished after moving to the farm.
Sure is nice of you to put me up like this, Mrs. Gunness.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Mr. Helgeland.
You write the most charming letters.
In 1908, the truth was discovered when a fire destroyed her home, as well as the bodies of her 3 children and the remains of 11 people being found. So was a headless body purported to be Gunness. However, there's speculation she faked her death.
Some say she killed more than 20 people and buried them. In April 1908, there was a fire at Belle's home. It's where the bodies of her 3 children were discovered.
Iowa, Gayno Smith. In 1962, Smith took 3 of his cousins to a nearby dance in Iowa. At the time, he was living with his uncle, aunt, and their children. Smith vanished for several hours, then returned and took his cousins back home. However, the kids found that the power was out, and as they searched, they discovered their mother and father's bodies. Smith suddenly appeared with a firearm and fatally shot 2 while the 3rd escaped. She found a 3rd sibling also killed, but managed to get help. When Smith was arrested, he admitted to taking his family's lives, as well as his stepmother's, who vanished in 1961, taking his victim count to 6. No known motive was discovered, and he was sentenced to life in jail. Kansas. Dennis Rader.
Why aren't there more? Why aren't there more? It seemed like as I got older, I started making, well, physically, just wasn't up to it.
From 1974 to 1979, a serial killer known as BTK was terrorizing Kansas. However, while the police believed the case was cold, the killer continued his fatal crimes until 1991. In 2004, the local newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, published an article on the case. Shortly after, the paper and TV station KAKE began getting letters from BTK.
BTK haunts treasured memories. Please don't go public with this just yet. We want to control this information.
However, the killer wanted to send a floppy disk of his writings, so he asked the police if it could be traced. They told him it was fine. Unfortunately for him, the metadata showed it was created in a church and by its council president, Rader, who was arrested. The Kansas native pled guilty to 10 counts of murder, earning him 10 consecutive life sentences.
Sir, I have been advised it is your desire to enter a plea of guilty in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Then BTK was finally locked up forever.
Kentucky, Donald Harvey.
I don't wish anybody dead, but if you had to, he'd be probably at the top of the list.
After an abusive childhood in Ohio, Harvey seemingly found his feet working as an orderly in a Kentucky hospital. However, in 1970, after getting angry at a patient, he took her life. For the next 17 years, Harvey worked at several medical facilities in Kentucky and Ohio. While he claimed he killed them to end their suffering, the orderly admitted that sometimes it was from anger.
The deaths came on too suddenly, and what was worse, the deaths were becoming more frequent.
Something's wrong.
Harvey also murdered those close to him who weren't ill. It came to an end in 1987, when an autopsy of one of Harvey's victims showed cyanide in his system. He pleaded guilty to 37 murders, earning him multiple life sentences, as he confessed to at least 50 killings. In 2017, Harvey was murdered by a fellow inmate.
As Harvey described killing one patient after another, the portrait of a serial killer emerged. He was convicted of murdering 34 patients. His confession detailed a murderous life spanning nearly 2 decades in 3 different hospitals in 2 states.
Louisiana, Derrick Todd Lee.
This guy right here, every time, kept coming up.
A man in his 20s named Derrick Lee was well known to law enforcement in the area.
From 1998 to 2003, Louisiana experienced a murder spree by the Baton Rouge serial killer who attacked in the city and nearby areas. Time was wasted when a profile and eyewitnesses pointed towards a white man. In reality, Lee, who was black, was behind the violent crimes. After one victim survived and managed to get a description to a sketch artist, another police station realized the similarities to Lee, whom they'd previously arrested. DNA samples from the murders matched his sample from his arrest. In 2004, while he was found guilty of 2 murders, Lee had been tied to other incidents since 1992, bringing his counts to over 7. Lee died in 2016 before he could be executed.
She stated, quote, "Derrick, he's still my brother, and he's been there for me, and I miss him."
Maine, Arthur Shawcross.
He has a steady job. He worked the overnight shift at G&G Food Service on East Main Street. He's lived in this apartment building at 241 Alexander Street for at least 3 years.
Despite committing his violent crimes in New York, earning him the moniker the Genesee River Killer, Shawcross was born in Maine before his family moved. In 1972, he claimed his first victims after assaulting them, earning him a maximum of 25 years in jail. By 1987, Shawcross was released and began his rampage.
You meet a prostitute on the street, and it's like a kid in a candy store, right?
He's using his bare hands to strangle them. Not only is this intimate, but this shows his absolute rage.
From 1988 to 1989, he took the lives of 12 more people. However, the last one would lead to Shawcross's downfall. After the body was discovered in early 1990 by police, the killer was seen by aerial surveillance watching the event while on a nearby bridge. In 1991, Shawcross was found guilty of 10 murders, earning him a combined 250 years in jail. In 2008, he passed away.
Is somebody who kills a person mentally ill? Probably. Is somebody who kills 11 people here and has killed 2 kids before got issues? Absolutely.
Maryland, Joseph Metheny.
Metheny was serving 2 life sentences for kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. He was charged with killing several Baltimore area prostitutes in the 90s.
Every so often on social media, the infamous image of Metheny appears to creep out everyone who sees it. Born and raised in Maryland, he said he became hooked on illegal substances following his stint in the Army. Metheny used his imposing size to his advantage against his victims. In 1996, he contacted a friend to help him dispose of a body he'd been hiding. However, the friend went to the cops. After his arrest, while Metheny did show evidence of 1 additional murder, he confessed to several more. He even claims to sell remains to unsuspecting restaurants. Metheny was sentenced for 2 murders, earning him life imprisonment, but he claimed he'd taken up to 13 lives. In 2017, he died in jail. Massachusetts, Jane Toppin. Typically, killer medical staff are known as angels of mercy, who take patients' lives to end their suffering. However, Toppin seemed to have found a more intimate connection with her killing. Born and living in Massachusetts, in the late 1800s, she became a nurse at general hospitals before working privately for patients. Known as Jolly Jane to staff, Toppin would often administer lethal medications and poisons to patients and their families. A toxicology report from one victim led to Toppin's arrest in 1901. She later admitted to taking 31 lives, but could only be tied to 12. After being declared not guilty by reason of insanity, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained until her passing in 1938. Michigan, Carl Watts.
Apparently, he still saw evil in women's eyes.
They found he had newspaper clippings in his cell, female photos in the paper with their eyes cut out.
Following his parents' split, Watts moved to Michigan. As a teenager, he attacked at least 1 woman. After spells in mental health facilities, Watts soon moved from attacking women to taking their lives in 1974, although it's speculated he started earlier. In 1982, after an attempted victim escaped, Watts was arrested and confessed to 13 murders in Texas and Michigan.
The man ID'd by Melinda is Carl Watts. The same man
suspected of 3 unsolved slayings in Michigan. Watts agrees to plead guilty to a charge of burglary with intent to commit murder.
Due to a plea deal, he wasn't charged with them, but was sentenced to 60 years. In 2004, due to a technicality, Watts was nearing a possible release. After the police pleaded publicly for more information, Watts was then found guilty of 2 Michigan murders, earning him life inside before dying in 2007. Police think he may have killed dozens more.
The chilling part about Watts is his own words that he used in 1982 after he was brought before the court. And as he was walking out of the courtroom, he turned around and said, "You know, if they ever release me, I'm going to kill again."
Minnesota, Joseph Turry Jr.
With a guilty verdict all but certain in the case of Diane Edwards, Joe Turry is once again looking for a way around doing hard time.
From 1978 to 1980, police in Minnesota were desperately searching for a violent attacker and killer. During this time, he'd taken the lives of 6 people, including 4 from the same family during a robbery. In 1980, multiple women and teenagers went to the authorities to disclose their assaults by Turry, who they swiftly arrested.
Before either Nancy or Cheryl was attacked, police stopped Joe Turry in a stolen car.
And they find all these papers.
Inside, they found hundreds of names, license tags, and telephone numbers of women.
Born and living in Minnesota, he was sentenced to 30 years for the assaults. However, Turry was soon tied to one of the shocking murders. Over the years, Turry had been found guilty of the other remaining murders, including the family in 2000, earning him multiple life sentences.
You would write down women's names, you would take down their license plates,
Don't
and then
make me
run
a
them
killer.
out. But you were a stalker.
Mississippi, Nathaniel Burkett. Switching between his birth state of Mississippi and Nevada, Burkett had a long criminal history. In 1978, after being found intoxicated near a murder scene in Las Vegas, he was sent away with no evidence to tie him to the deed. 5 years later, Burkett was sentenced to 20 years after murdering his mother. Upon his release in 1992, he continued his violent crimes, killing several people. One finally resulted in a conviction of manslaughter in 2003, but he was released in 2009. However, Burkett's DNA was tested and matched the evidence from the 1978 murder.
After DNA evidence linked Burkett to Cox, the family says they thought they would finally have their day in court. Tonight they are angry after prosecutors offered Burkett a deal and he pled guilty to second-degree murder.
In 2018, after pleading guilty to 2 murders, he was given 10 years to life in prison, and it's believed he'd taken upwards of 5 lives. In 2021, Burkett passed away.
More importantly, what I'm here talking to you about today is Nathan Burkett may have never been identified without the usage of DNA today.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into settings and switch on your notifications. Missouri, John Edward Robinson.
I could not think of a man that deserved to suffer the ultimate punishment than John Robinson.
Sometimes a person may appear to be a friendly grandpa, but is actually responsible for horrific deeds. Case in point, Robinson. Born in Illinois, he was a Boy Scout before descending into crime, often into fraud. However, he showcased himself as a good community person. Yet, by 1984, he had moved on to murder. After being released in 1993 following a conviction for fraud, Robinson began using the internet.
With a lot of serial killers, you hear the cliche about them living double lives. This guy had 5 lives.
Under the alias Slave Master, he frequented adult websites for victims, making him believed to be the first internet serial killer. After being accused of battery, the police investigated Robinson and found human remains on his property. By 2003, he had been found guilty of 8 murders and sentenced to capital punishment.
Finally, he is returned to death row. The investigation over. The killing finally stopped.
Would you have selected a different serial killer for a particular state? Let us know below.